Good evening. I'd like to talk to you tonight about the most horrible, terrible threat that America faces ever. That it's ever faced. It's the worst thing in the world. And only I'm going to tell you about it, because I'm the only one who's going to tell you about it. America may be... Sit down. America may be turning into a European country. But first I want to talk a little bit about Egypt. You've probably heard enough. For example, you might have heard two things about the Egyptian Revolution. First, revolutions are absolutely terrible. They're terrifying, they're awful, and they shake up what God wants for all of us, which is to obey the authorities that have been in place before we were born and ought not be questioned, and whose reform can only be determined by their sanctioned rule. For example, we might look at our own example. It's a great example. America, after its revolution, decided to purge the Ohio River Valley of Native Americans, and good old George Washington thought that it might be best to respond to an uprising of farmers and Revolutionary War veterans with violence. So just imagine that many revolutions often lead to a consolidation of power and the establishment of a very strong centralized authority against which there can be no objection. We've seen this in major democratic shifts in Germany in the 1930s with their policy of Lebensraum, which is German for manifest destiny. We've seen this in the Russian Revolution, which a very weak democratic ruler decided that they did not want to end the war for imperial glory in Europe in World War I. And by the end of the year, it was overturned by the Bolsheviks, and they did a lot of nasty things, which your history books will tell you about because they were on the left. We also have the great example of Iran, a very similar thing, a revolution betrayed by a theocratic element that kind of glommed itself on. We're very frightened that Egypt might turn into this because we prefer our theocratic despots to be in mujahideen form and to oppose our enemies, and cutting off hands is terrible, but it's worse when it's done by people we don't like. So there's that. You also have the in more recent years the fall of the Soviet Union, which doomed millions of American school children. This is true, to learn names like Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. New maps had to be printed for every classroom. Unconscionable. And then, of course, you have more recent still, the Ron Paul Revolution, during which at least 1,000 people nationwide started to believe that the gold standard made sense. Revolutions, they're revolts against natural law. So we might want to be very careful. And in all seriousness, Egypt, you've got the military in power. There you go. I mean, this is a cause for a lot of people to be triumphant and triumphalist, and not yet triumphant. A lot of people feel like this is. Let me own the statement. I feel like this, speaking as someone of partial Middle Eastern ancestry, this feels to me like a shift on the line of the falling of the Berlin Wall, and maybe that's an awful analogy, but I feel like I am looking at a region that has been under despotism and a lack of human rights for so very long, and it has been played one way and the other by the superpowers, and now we have this blessed hyperpower, which I happen to live in, and I do reap the benefits of that every single day. So let me be honest. I understand that. Being a Roman is terrific, but nevertheless, I feel like in giving $1 billion a year to people who haven't earned it, to people who weren't elected, to people who just kind of happen to be in power and be in a place where we want them to do certain things, I feel like it is. When you think about $30 billion over the last 30 years, I mean that may not be anything compared to how much we've given to some other things, but especially like our occupations. But that's a lot of effort, to keep a lot of people down, and frankly, it hasn't been for Egypt that we have done the things that we have done. And if the Egyptians want to seize a moment to take the reins of history and not merely ride them out or let someone else drive them where we would have them go, if they want to take that up for a moment, I think that's one of the most courageous things that a people can do. Rising up against the state is not always appropriate. It is not always a likely thing to be successful. It can often lead to a horrible reversion, the coming to power, the co-optation of a revolution, the betrayal of a revolution, as some have had it, by the worst elements. And yet, for all that, perhaps because of all that, it is one of the most courageous human acts in all of history. And I just want to say that in the spirit of the plebeian revolt in Rome that saw the patricians denied their workforce, in the history of the American Revolution, in the example of so many peoples throughout time who have said no more, and have said there is a limit to what we are willing to take. Good luck to you, Egypt. And I hope that one day I don't have to look at that area of the map and think of the brutal tyrants who dominate millions of people and deny them not only development, as we're talking about in the technocratic media of this country, but basic breathing room, basic ability to voice, to give vent to their full-throated anger and dissatisfaction and discontent and disagreement. All these things, I cannot speak of these things. I have not lived in such places. Good luck. I feel that America must return to its roots. And one of those things is having respect for people's rights, even if we disagree with them. And that is what brings me to this creeping threat of Europeanism. Europe is not merely is used most commonly as some type of epithet for post-war socialist states, usually these cartoons that are invented out of whole cloth and believed by millions of people who have never been to Europe. I feel that what we are doing right now, by paying attention to our narrow interest and doing as the Obama administration has done, vacillating and wobbling back and forth between we kind of support this, but Mubarak, and then oh no, we were totally behind you the whole time. And of course harder versions like the Republicans who evidently have only support foreign aid when it goes to a dictator who again brutalizes their own people. Thanks, Newt. Loved the prudence on your teaching President Obama how to let a dictator down easily. I'm sure you wish you were treated the same in the 90s when you were deposed. But basically, what we have done is start to see things in such a zero-sum game, in such a way that we are anything that we do not predict, anything that we do not control, is an injury against ourselves. And I do feel like this is a relic of the Cold War, when we were in a struggle with a totally despotic power that murdered millions, as was often done during that war on both sides. Murdered millions, dominated still more millions, and ran things according to its own purposes and not to any type of value, not to any type of virtue. There was no. We have started to see America as more important than democracy, America as more important than autonomy, as self-determination. And I feel that we have fallen very far from the post-war period when America alone had more than 50% of the world's industrial capacity. And the sad fact is, it's sad for those who think that it can somehow be reversed. But the simple fact is that we are now part of a community and we may not agree with everybody who's in this community, but we do not have the economic clout that we once had, because in absolute terms we can improve, but in relative terms there is only so much that we can do when there are billions of other people on this planet, and we number not even 500 million. We have tremendous things to offer. We have tremendous strength here. I believe that America can quite possibly be a power for centuries. But the difficulty is that we are going to have to admit to ourselves that we are not going to be a hyperpower. We cannot, without cost, continue to. Some would say we're already there, but I feel like we are most definitely slipping into an imperial state of mind, in which we determine who is fit for democracy, and only with our say so, and at the risk of our veto, do we allow others to have the rights that we so boldly said in the 1700s belong to everyone, and that were God-given. And I feel that we, not in some tacky Obama-esque way, we do stand to lose the future by not standing with those who are going to that want to have their own say in how history is written. They do not want to have it written for them. Right now, we continue to defend Saudi Arabia, which is ruled by a bloodline that arrogate to themselves the rights to whore, drink, gamble, fritter away their considerable oil wealth, and yet they dine on their own people's blood. And in Bahrain, we have foreign troops brought in, given fast passes to citizenship, Pakistanis, those from Yemen, brought in to beat the native Bahraini people. And we are allies with this group because the Fifth Fleet is stationed there, and because we want to push pressure on Iran. Now, I believe in putting pressure on Iran. They are ruled by a terrible clique. I oppose theocracy in all its forms, but I fail to see the charm in supporting despots against despots. I fail to see the nobility, and I fail to see the necessity in the war that we are waging currently. And I see it as as really a bit of domestic posturing that, because of our power, we are able to throw across the entire world. And I'm just wondering, when is America going to stop resembling the ancien regime, the old powers of pre-revolutionary Europe? We are not, under Obama, we are certainly not becoming a welfare state on a par with the Nordic countries, or even the mixed economy of France. We are becoming quite similar to Louis XIV. We are becoming quite similar to the Wilhelmian Empire under Germany that colonized parts of Africa. We are quickly becoming a group that is insisting on privilege in defense of crushing others' rights. And I do feel that is a decline. I do feel that is a vulgar betrayal of all the things this country can stand for. So think to yourself precisely what business you have telling others what to do. Think to yourself precisely what authority you have to tell others what they can and cannot do. Think to yourself precisely what you want to do with yourself, and imagine fixing your own problems first. Good night. America is all of us, and all of us are letting things happen as they are. Maybe you'll want to have a little bit of an Egyptian thought tonight.